Welcome everybody. Welcome to the seminar. The topic of the seminar is heating policy and its impacts. This is a network heating and cooling webinar, and it's our first of the year. I'm Dr. Andy Smallbone. I'm an associate professor at Durham, and I'm the director of the EPSRC Network Plus on the decarbonisation of heating and cooling. And our event is organised through that EPSRC Network Plus. And this is the first of a series looking at different challenges in decarbonising our heating and cooling activities. And this week we're going to welcome two speakers on the subject of heating policy and its impacts. They'll provide their own thoughts from a policy and academic perspective. So first, we're going to hear from Sarah Bailey, and she is from the Clean Heat Directorate at BEIS, and she'll present on the recently published Heat and Building Strategy. Sarah works in the Clean Heat Directorate of BEIS and has been involved in the development of the recent study and the recent strategy document and the funded programs that it contains.
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me to speak today. As Andy said in his introduction, my name is Sarah Bailey and I lead on the network impacts of electrification of heat in the Clean Heat Directorate in BEIS. So I'll be presenting today on the heat and building strategy, but with a particular focus on electrification of heat and what we're doing in BEIS to scale up heat pump deployment. So I wanted to just start with a slide to set the scene a little bit and set the scale of the challenge that we're facing with decarbonising buildings. So as I am sure many of you are aware, heating buildings accounts for 23% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the UK. So to meet our net zero emissions target by 2050, we need to decarbonise virtually all of our buildings across the building stock. So that includes homes as well as commercial and public buildings. And we're going to do this by making our buildings, firstly, more energy efficient, and then also installing low carbon heating systems. And this means converting around 30 million buildings to low carbon heating by 2050, which is, of course, a significant challenge. And in all future pathways to net zero, heat pumps are expected to play a major role. And again, as I'm sure you're aware, in the 10-point plan, we set out our ambition to scale up heat pump deployment to at least 600,000 installations a year by 2050. So what is our approach to decarbonising buildings? I think this diagram sets it out quite nicely. So we'll start at the top of the pyramid there with new build. We know that new build homes are likely to have a low heat demand, and obviously there'll be no expensive retrofit costs associated with decarbonising them. So we think they're well suited to heat pumps, and we're anticipating around 200,000 annual heat pump installations in new homes from 2028. Moving down the pyramid to off-gas grid buildings, so there's over 5 million homes and businesses in the UK that are off the gas grid, that are currently using oil, LPG or resistive electric heating. And for these buildings, again, we think heat pumps are going to be typically the most cost-effective low-carbon heating solution. And then at the bottom there, we have homes that are on the gas grid, and there's currently around 25 million homes on the gas grid. And for these buildings, the kind of future pathway for decarbonising them is more uncertain. It's probably going to vary locally, but options include heat networks, efficient electric heating, so predominantly heat pumps, or replacing the gas in the gas grid with low carbon alternatives such as hydrogen or biogas. And you can see from the diagram there, we've got the energy efficiency band that's spanning all of those buildings. And I think it's important to emphasise just how important energy efficiency will be and the role it'll play across all of the different buildings we have in the UK. Moving on now to the heat and building strategy. So the strategy was published in October last year and sets out a number of near-term actions that we're taking to make sure that we remain on track to net zero. So that includes making homes more energy efficient, as I've mentioned previously. So we want EPC C across all homes by 2035, where it's cost effective, practical and affordable to do so. We're also growing the UK heat pump market, aiming to deliver at least 600,000 annual installations by 2028, and that's up from 35,000 installations today. So we do have a way to go there. And we're also expanding the use of low carbon heat networks, so especially where there's waste heat or high densities of heat demand that we can take advantage of. We're also undertaking research and development to test the safety and feasibility of hydrogen for heating, so including trials and pilots on hydrogen. And that's to enable strategic decisions in 2026 on the future role of hydrogen and what that will mean for future UK heating. And lastly, we're boosting funding to decarbonise buildings, and there's a whole host of funding schemes that are out there. But just to name a few, we've got the boiler upgrade scheme with £450 million attached to it, £950 million home upgrade grant, a social housing decarbonisation fund, and the public sector decarbonisation fund. And the strategy is underpinned by 5 key principles for how we'll decarbonise heating buildings. The first one there is to take a whole buildings and whole energy system approach. That means considering heating needs and energy performance of the building as a whole, as well as considering how we decarbonise heat in parallel with decarbonising other sectors and areas. We're also taking low regret actions now. So whilst the exact energy mix that will exist in 2050 isn't yet clear, we know that there's some actions that are needed in all scenarios, including improving building energy performance, reskilling the workforce and growing the market for both heat pumps and heat networks. And we're also trying to balance certainty with flexibility by providing clear communications and signals to investment to provide market stability while still ensuring we have that flexibility in our approach. And we're also providing targeted support for those that need it most, so fuel poor households and low income households in particular. And then last but definitely not least, we're prioritising research and innovation. And that's to both improve our evidence base and the technologies that we have to underpin key policies and decisions that need to be made down the line. So turning to energy efficiency, we're clear in the heat and building strategy that the journey to net zero starts with improving the energy efficiency of the fabric of our buildings. And this will not only save households and businesses money off their bills, it will also improve the comfort and value of their homes. So government has already committed to upgrading as many homes as possible to EPC Band C by 2035, where it's cost effective, practical and affordable to do so. And we're supporting this by consulting on phasing in minimum performance standards across all tenure types. We're also looking to upgrade fuel poor homes to fuel poverty energy efficiency rating C by 2030. And we're doing that through investing 1.75 billion in the home upgrade grant and the social housing decarbonisation fund, which will help those living in the worst off gas grid homes and those on low incomes who are most vulnerable to fuel poverty. We're also pursuing research and development on the safety and feasibility of hydrogen for heat. So unlike other technologies like heat pumps and heat networks, 100% hydrogen for heat is not yet an established option. So government is working with industry and regulators to deliver a range of research, development and testing projects to assess the feasibility, costs and benefits of using 100% hydrogen for heating. And this includes a pioneering programme of hydrogen heating trials. So we've set the aim to deliver a neighbourhood heating trial by 2023 and a village trial by 2025. And then there's plans for a potential town pilot before the end of the decade. So the neighbourhood trial will be the H100 project in Fife, and BEIS and Ofgem have invited the gas network operators to submit proposals for the village trial by December 2021, so that's just closed. And we're expecting some of the proposals will need some detailed planning in 2022 before location selection happens in 2023. And the local trials and planning work, together with the results of our wider research, development and testing programme, will enable strategic decisions in 2026 on the future role of hydrogen for heat, including whether we proceed with that hydrogen heated town. So what does this mean for heat pump deployment? So as we've seen in the pyramid diagram, we think heat pumps will be a key technology for many buildings, including off-gas grid buildings and new builds, as well as consumers that may prefer to install a heat pump over other low carbon alternatives. So for example, where a heat pump might be installed as part of a broader improvements to a home to create a smart home. In terms of the timelines, so 2028 is obviously the key date, and we're developing policies to ensure deployment of heat pumps reaches at least 600,000 installations by 2028. And then beyond that, so if limited low carbon hydrogen is used for heating, we'd need to grow the heat pump market even further. So we'd be looking at 1.5 million installations a year by the mid-2030s in order to kind of switch over those remaining gas boilers by 2050. So how will we achieve this? There's a number of pillars for how we're going to go about building the market to deliver 600,000 installations a year by 2028. And the first one is proposed regulations. So alongside the heat and building strategy, we launched a number of consultations on regulations. So off the gas grid, proposing to phase out new fossil fuel heating installations in large non-domestic off-gas grid buildings from 2024. From 2026, we're proposing to phase out new fossil fuel heating in non-domestic, small non-domestic even, and domestic buildings. Moving over to new build, so we're looking to make clean heat the norm in new buildings through the Future Homes Standard, which is going to be introduced in 2025. And we're also consulting on ending new connections to the gas grid for new build domestic properties in England from 2025. And then on the gas grid, obviously the future of heat pumps on the gas grid really depends on that strategic decision on the future of hydrogen in 2026. But across all of those types of buildings from 2035, we're aiming to only install net zero compatible heating technology. Moving on to building the market. So we're looking to build the market through providing public funding and green finance, as well as a new market mechanism. So starting with public funding and green finance there, as part of the heat and building strategy, as I've mentioned already, we announced £3.9 billion worth of new funding for decarbonising heat and buildings from 2022 to 2025. And one of the key ones there for heat pumps, although all of the schemes have some aspect of heat pump deployment, is the boiler upgrade scheme. This will be launching in spring 2022 to replace the domestic renewable heat incentive, which is closing in March. And the scheme will provide £450 million worth of funding over 3 years, with £5,000 worth of upfront grants to support the installation of air source heat pumps and £6,000 to support the installation of ground source heat pumps. And we've also awarded £1.8 million worth of funding to promote green lending products for energy performance improvements, part of the Green Homes Finance Innovation Fund competition. Then moving down, we've got the market mechanism. So subject to consultation, we're proposing to bring in an obligation for fossil fuel boiler manufacturers from 2024 to achieve a kind of proportion of their sales, and that will be a growing proportion in line with the trajectory of market growth needed to meet our 600,000 heat pump installation target by 2028. And we expect that this will operate in a similar way to similar tradable market-wide mechanisms for other sectors. So for example, the fleet-wide obligation on car manufacturers to increase the proportion of sales from lower emissions of vehicles. Finally, we're looking to reduce the cost of heat pumps. So aiming to reduce the upfront cost of heat pumps by 25 to 50% by 2025, as well as making them no more expensive to run. And we're looking to do that by rebalancing energy prices, growing the market for time of use tariffs, and improving heat pump efficiency. And innovation will also play a role here. So the 60 million heat pump ready innovation programme will run from spring 2022 to March 2025, and the window for applications is currently open. This programme is a key part of our 1 billion net zero innovation portfolio that as a whole is looking to accelerate the commercialisation of innovative clean energy technologies and processes throughout the 2020s and 2030s. So the Heat Pump Ready programme is going to build on the ongoing Electrification of Heat demonstration project, and is looking to bring together the key players from across the heat pump landscape to enable kind of coordinated and efficient deployment of heat pumps at scale. In terms of what the programme involves, there's three main streams to it. So stream one is looking at solutions for high density deployment of heat pumps. And this is developing and trialling solutions and methodologies for that high density deployment, with £30 million worth of funding available from spring 2022. Stream 2 is looking at developing tools and technologies to overcome barriers to heat pump deployment, and again beginning from spring 2022. And then finally Stream 3, which will look at trial learning and support, so we'll span across the trials and schemes as part of the programme, and kind of bring together those lessons learned and provide join up. So I guess watch this space on the Heat Pump Ready Innovation Programme. I think it's going to be an interesting one. And that brings me to the end of my presentation.